Hosting today. I am here with Lois Hall. It is my pleasure to be here with Lois Hall today. And before we get into intros and things like that, I'd like to share a little bit about what Create a World is. It's really a community that creates an invitation to be in our curiosity, and through that, to be engaged in conversation, almost as if we're sitting around the campfire, discovering and exploring what it means for each one of us to be in the aliveness of new futures rising and shifting our perspectives. The collaborators in the field of Tantra Mat, along with the principles of Tantra Mat, really, it's a collective cultural community, and we're all committed to sharing the wisdom that each of us has on behalf of all life. And really, how does that wisdom express itself not only with life, with each other, but with creation? So I welcome everyone. And some of the principles that are really the foundational pieces to Create a World and the field of Tantra Mat are everything operates on behalf of everything else. Everything is in relationship to everything else. Everything is a part of everything else. Everything has a place. Everything operates on behalf of life and what helps us to exist as whole. And everything is moving, like everything's moving to the next greater whole. So with that being said, Lois, welcome. Lois Hall. I met you, I think, like 15 years ago. And it's been an honor, to be friends with you now. And her background includes public health. And she was one of the first people in Ohio to study AIDS epidemiology. And during that process, or throughout those years, she was introduced to John James, the founder of the grief recovery method, which is how I originally met Lois all those years ago. And I really, I love the quote that you have posted on your microsite for the grief recovery website. And I'm paraphrasing, but unresolved grief is a major, largely unaddressed public health issue. Wow, right? And with the current events going on, we spoke just a moment previously before we were going live, and wow, the impact is global, whether you're right there in it or here. We're in Ohio, so it's impacting everyone at different levels. Mm-hmm. I'd like to also share, and we'll talk about that a little more. I'd like to also share that some of the communities that Lois is really passionate about working with and for are the LGBTQ communities, the communities that are affected by the drug epidemics, which Ohio is huge with that. Not only the clergy, but also with the courts and the incarcerated people. So or people that are incarcerated. So it's a wide spectrum of people. And that's one of another threading, I think, that we have is I'm also very interested in those communities. I think I think that's all I want to say at the moment. And I want to invite you, Lois, to add any tidbits or any other nuggets that you would like to share about you. Mm-hmm. And then shift into like, what is that bridging for you from public health and the grief recovery method? We'll start there and then we'll see where the conversation leads.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you, Lori. Thank you. So I grew up on a farm in northwestern Ohio, and from about the 4th or 5th grade on, I wanted to be a doctor. I didn't really know any other health careers. I mean, doctors and nurses, that was pretty much it. I didn't want to be a nurse. If you're a nurse out there, God bless you. But I wanted to be a doctor. And I didn't get into medical school. And so I got this job at the Ohio Department of Health, which was just, it was exactly where I was supposed to be. You know, it seems like a lot of what you talk about, Lori, is this kind of this centrality and how everything is connected, right? Well, so getting that job in public health was great. The reason I wanted to be a doctor was, it sounds so simple and naive, I wanted to help people. I wanted to help people in a medical realm, right? Rather than an educational realm or a natural realm or a financial realm. I wanted to help people in a health realm. And it was through that job, before AIDS, but certainly with AIDS, when my heart just really got touched by these people with AIDS and the grief that their families had, particularly their partners, their loved ones, their friends, you know, absolutely. But the families, the moms, the dads, right? And it was so controversial and so stigmatized that a lot of times those folks lived just in painful silence. I used to call it the awful secret. They couldn't tell anybody. Oh yeah, my son came home from San Francisco. Yeah, he announced he's gay and he's got AIDS, you know, but you know, we're going to deal with that. They couldn't tell anybody. And so they sat with that immense grief of both pieces of knowledge. It wasn't just grief that their son, and in the early days, it was all young men. I know now it's men and women. In the early days, you know, the grief that their son had AIDS, this terrible, horrible, deadly disease, but their son was gay. Because, you know, grief isn't just about death. It's about the loss of hopes and dreams and expectations as well. And so when you find out that your child is LGBTQ, that changes some of your expectations about weddings and children and babies and, you know, all of those things. And so this idea that grief was huge. And again, the things that are happening in the world is like a burden. It just weighs us down. And that's what I saw in those people. And so realizing that and then seeking out, I mean, everybody was trying to treat the AIDS medically, but who was doing anything to treat the grief? Mm-hmm. And so that's when I sought out and found John James, who wrote the Grief Recovery Handbook, and used government dollars, CDC grant dollars, to bring John to town to talk to groups of physicians and nurses and chaplains and anybody I could get to listen. And he finally said, you know, you've got to get trained to do this, or I'm not coming back here, because I come in and open up feelings and I go back to California. And so that you know, that whole AIDS time took me to not just the LGBT world, but you mentioned the drug world too, right? I mean, back in the day, remember, it was IV drug users were the second major risk group. And so a friend of mine asked me, you know, in conversation at one point, what's a nice country girl like you doing with those people, right? And I meant to say, oh my gosh, I know now I'm in the best place for me. You know, all of those classes that I took to prepare me to be a doctor, all the things, you know, that were in my mind and my heart that wanted me to be a doctor to help people. I meant to say I'm in the best place for me. And the slip of the tongue came out, I know I'm in the blessed place for me. Mm-hmm. And even as I said it, I thought, that was no accident. That was no slip of the tongue. That is my truth. For me, being in this field of grief and public health and within my faith, I tell people those are the three things that kind of ground and make me who I am: my public health background, my grief recovery work, and my faith. That makes who I am. And what's better than being in the best place, but being in the blessed place? And so here I am, right? Here I am. And we met, and I've met many other amazing people through this grief work. And I still get to help people. That's what I do. I help people. I help people. And to me, it is a medical realm. Grief is a medical issue. It's a public health issue. So yeah, so that's how I got here and why I love it. I mean, I feel like I'm right in the middle of exactly where I'm supposed to be. What's better than that?
Yeah, it's interesting because one of the, this just pinged me about my first experience meeting you with a group, and one of the access points, if you will, of the creator world. It's about coming together in our sacredness of our uniqueness. And I'll never forget this, and I share it so often, that when I first met you, I was supporting a friend, a very deep friend that was going through her own loss at the time, very shocking loss. And she knew my history of the death of my parents when I was younger. And I'm like, of course I will go support you. And I'm, the introductions, I'm like, I'm here for her. Mm-hmm. And I just blurted out why the biggest loss in my life. And you so graciously and gently was like, I honor that you are here for your friend, and we do our own work here. And the most impactful experience that really allowed me to be in my vulnerability,
absolutely,
in my authenticity, and in my transparency. I said stuff that was in my heart that was incomplete, that I didn't even know was incomplete until the experience. And wow, having a community that held me in the sacredness of my uniqueness in that relationship was huge. And that's why I got trained right after when you were doing the training.
Yeah.
And I use all of those principles today, that's a universal thing. We all experience grief, change.
Absolutely. And that's what I tell people too. I'm an epidemiologist, right? I'm the numbers person. 100% of us are grievers. 100% of us have those things we've never shared or told anybody else. We've all got those things deep, deep, deep inside our hearts. And they need to come out, right? We honor them when we share them with others, and when others share theirs with us. Sacred moments. They are indeed sacred moments when that happens. It brings out that vulnerability, that truth. And to me, there's just nothing greater than that. I tell people, because society teaches us, don't talk about it. Don't feel bad. Just get another one. It's just a dog. Just get another one. Or you're young, you can have more children. Or you're lucky, your mom was 82 and she's in a better place. Well, baloney. There's another B word I could use, but I'll start with baloney, right? She may be in a better place, but I'm not. Right. And so we're taught to keep that stuff inside. And the things we do to try to keep it there are we eat, we drink, we drug, we sex, we gamble, we shop, whatever it is. And again, a lot of those things, those are public health issues, right? The drug abuse, the obesity, the tobacco use, the drug use, the alcohol, those are public health issues. And I tell people, I am a picture for having grown up in a household where food was the way we solved our grief. Just eat something, you'll feel better, right? Don't talk with your mouth full. It was another way of saying, don't talk about it. I don't want to hear what really happened at school today. Here, just eat something. And so when I took my grief recovery method training and we got to that part of the training, I literally sat there and cried Because as an epidemiologist, a public health person, well, no wonder we're not having success with our public health ills and issues, right? Because we're not getting to the heart of the matter. I tell people you could put calorie counts on every menu in town. And if I need a comfort food, that's where I'm going. I don't care what the calories are. And we all need that comfort, right? But we seek it in those places that usually aren't real healthy for us, right? And even today, I mean, the drug epidemic, violence, suicide, homicide, all of those things are ways that our little tea kettle of grief, imagine if all of our losses are like little bubbles down in our little tea kettle here, but we've got that stopper in our throat that says, there it is. That's actually a symptom. When I'm starting to talk about it, my throat tightens up. That's how we're made, but that cork is in there. Don't talk about it, eat something, whatever the things you were told as a child. And eventually the energy, something else happens, another loss happens, another change comes in our life. And it's just like if you turn up the fire under the tea kettle and there's a cork there, we've got to go someplace, right? And so, that realization that all these things we deal with in public health trace back to, for a large part, unresolved grief. And nobody was dealing with that. Nobody was dealing with that. We were millions of dollars. Look at our medical system. Look at how many hospitals there are. And, megaliths, in the hospitals in Columbus. Every time you drive by, they're building a new building. Mm-hmm. But are they getting to the heart of it? Right. And it comes in that sharing with the honesty, the truth, the vulnerability, the transparency. We've got to get that stuff out in a healthier way. Mm-hmm. So, I ask people sometimes too, have you ever felt so physically nauseous you knew you would feel better if you could throw up? And everybody goes, oh yeah, I sat by the pots of it, right? And the deal is our hearts, every one of us, our hearts are nauseous because of this stuff that has been fermenting down in there. And we need an emotional puke, right? Mm-hmm. It's got to come out. And so that's what happened that first night. God bless you, Lori, that very first night, you didn't expect to tell us the story about your childhood and your parents, but there it came.
Yeah.
Right. And I'll bet you it felt better even after that first night, that first night.
100%. And, it's interesting because you and I, we've also had many conversations about languaging. And I remember the way that I was told how to be in this situation, I never cried. So that's why I think I am much more emotional now. I stuffed it in for the majority of my life. There was that intellectualizing of whatever. I can't even think of those stories now, but putting it in my head, cutting off my heart, and being in the language of, oh, well, my parents are no longer with me, or they passed away, or to sugarcoat it instead of being truth in what really went on. And the grief recovery method during my experience was the first time I was honest with myself, because I had, and for those of you that don't know, I'm going to say it right now. It was a murder-suicide. And there was stigma. I hate violence. I abhor it. And my dad was one of those people. So to reconcile that, whoa, that was challenging. And, definitely through the process, and with global events happening, it shows me how much work needs to be done to get into our hearts.
Absolutely.
We as a society, as a global society, the tendency, not all, but the tendency is to be in the intellectual engagement of events and what have you. Yes, those are sometimes important, and I'm connecting with my heart.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the world, but perhaps even most here in the United States, we are built on intellect. And what's one of the first questions you say when you meet somebody? What do you do?
Yeah.
Right? What's your occupation? What do you do? It's like that values or judges your importance somehow by what you do. We don't talk about how are you? And well, we ask how are you? And then we lie and say I'm fine when we're really not. I'm feelings inside not expressed, fine. But this separation, you're right, between the head and the heart. Again, my background was a biology major, right? I wanted to be a doctor. And so I took all of the biology classes. And I tell people, I have learned more about the brain working with the grief recovery method than I ever did in an anatomy and physiology class. It just amazes me how the brain tries to control the heart. It thinks it's protecting us. Right. Well, don't talk about it, Lori, because if you do, you'll cry. And then what will people think of you? Right. Or will they judge you? Something about, thank you for saying the words murder and suicide. Both have stigma, don't they? Don't they? And to a child, you were what, adolescent or
13.
13, young teenager at the time, there's probably that thing there too that says, well, who am I then? Will I do those same things? Will that happen to me? What does that mean? Did my dad love me? Did my mom love me? I never knew. And so all of those things, but the brain says, just don't talk about it. Come to support your friend, pretend like it didn't happen. And I don't know whether you ate or drank or drugged or smoked. I don't know what you did to numb yourself, to numb yourself from those things. But that's what we do. And the brain thinks it's protecting us. And so it's this continual struggle between our heart that just wants to tell the truth, wants to have that emotional puke, and the brain says, no, you don't, keep it inside. No, you don't, keep it inside. What will they think? Right. And people will say, well, that's just ridiculous. No, the brain isn't, and so I tell them this other example, have you ever been driving down the freeway and your bladder says, I need to pee? And your brain says, no, you don't. You got another hour and you'll be home. You can wait for an hour until you get home and then you can pee. And it's like, no, you don't understand. And even now, as I'm speaking, my knees are going together, right? I don't have to pee, but because that's the brain, and the heart, the bladder says, no, you don't understand. I really need to pee. And the brain says, oh, all right. And the bladder says, great. Can I stop at a gas station? And the brain says, oh, all right. And then the bladder says, there's a gas station. And your brain goes, no, not that one. It doesn't look good. Right? That is your brain having that argument with your bladder, trying to tell it how to do its business. And it's the same thing with the heart. If the heart doesn't get to have these pukes, this expression of our true feelings, our vulnerability, it could be messy. It could be embarrassing. And it can cause health problems, right? If you don't pee frequently, right, it can cause bladder and ureter problems. It's the same thing with our heart. If it doesn't get to tell its story in a non-judgmental situation, no analyzing, criticizing, judging, or fixing, if our heart doesn't get to tell its truth, it actually causes more physical health problems, right? Your blood pressure goes up. You get migraines, your glucose gets out of whack, you get IBS, you have allergies, you have breathing, all of those things. Bessel van der Kolk wrote the book, The Body Keeps the Score. Science is proving now that if our heart doesn't get to do its business and tell its story, that's public health. The things we do to avoid, right? And the consequences of the avoiding.
Yeah.
All of those things are public health issues. And nobody talks about that. Now, COVID finally got people starting to talk about grief and mental health, right? Mental health. I'm thankful that has begun to be a little more in the media, but I would suggest that it's not really mental health, it's emotional health. For me, mental is what happens up here. Emotional is what happens down here. And so again, even as I'm telling you this now, I'm thinking, there we go again, right? Mental health. We want to fix the mental health, but we're not doing anything to fix the emotional health.
Yeah.
It's that struggle between the two.
Yeah.
So,
and that's the beautiful thing about the sacredness of our uniqueness. We are all of that, right? And, going back to the principles, everything is in relationship to everything else. Everything has a place, and when we understand or are able to broaden our perspective to incorporate some of those ideas and principles, we understand that no matter where upon this earth globally, it's the ripple effect is going to impact us, whether it's not like right in our back door or not, or it is, there is an impact. And how can we be more fully in our ability to navigate that, to navigate the change or the impact that external forces has. And for me, part of it is grief recovery stuff, movement, rest,
Yes.
community, all of that.
Yeah,
faith.
absolutely. Absolutely. Somebody at a workshop, many people have probably been to a trauma-informed workshop or a trauma-informed training program. God bless you if you do that, or if that's your thing. But trauma and grief for me are two sides of the same coin. Trauma is what happens. Grief is what lingers. And if you don't deal with the grief, that's what brings up the panic attacks, the nightmares, the PTSD later on. You've got to deal with the grief. Trauma is what happens. Grief is what lingers. And at this workshop several years ago, it was before COVID, the speaker asked, many of you have probably said when somebody is really anxious and agitated, just breathe, just breathe. And that takes us to kind of some of the movement, doesn't it? In through the nose, out through the mouth. Just breathe, just breathe. Focus on your breathing. And she asked, do you know why that works? Do you know why that works? And nobody raised their hand. She says, it's because you cannot breathe in the past and you cannot breathe in the future. Yeah, try it. Lori, can you breathe 10 minutes ago? No, me either. Can you breathe 10 minutes? No, 10 minutes from now? No, can't do it. So just even that idea of breathing keeps us in the present moment, right? In the present moment. And look, here we are. That just came naturally, putting these two together, to be in the present moment. And for me, that's a part of what the grief recovery method teaches us too, to tell the truth in the present moment. Don't worry about what will they think of you in the future, or don't look back and go, oh, I wish I would have or could have or should have done something back here. It teaches us to be in this very precious, very sacred present moment. And when we are in the present moment with people, that's when our hearts connect and we feel safe to tell those stories that have been stuffed down inside, sometimes for decades. The work you came when, I don't know, were you in your 20s back then, 15 years ago? But I've worked with people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, who have carried these griefs around like a backpack on their back for decades, still weighed down and burdened, right? Because of what happened in the past. And so just the preciousness of this, bringing people to this place to be able to teach them some skills and tools to empty their heart, to empty that backpack and be in the present moment, not to regret the past or worry about the future, but to be in the present moment. That's all we have any ability to be in anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, and that what you're just speaking to is a great segue to a question that we have. So this person is asking, like, how can they be with family, friends that don't want to discuss emotions? How do I feel badly towards them?
Yeah.
Or how do I not feel badly?
How do I not feel badly? Right. Well, and the first thing that comes to my mind is that we go first, right? We go first. We tell our truth. And we don't need to tell the details as much as we tell how it feels. And again, people ask you all the time, I'll bet 6 or 12 or 20 times a day, somebody will say, hey, Lori, how are you? And we lie and we say, I'm fine, when we're really not, which breaks our heart. And so the first suggestion would be, if you want others to share their feelings, their emotions with you, you need to be able to first share yours. And again, we mentioned, and you did and I did both mention, it has to be in this non-judgmental, non-critical, non-analyzing way. And unfortunately, a lot of us, when we think somebody else is doing something wrong or it's feeling bad, It's this finger shaking. And even with a kind tone in our voice. Oh, come on, you can tell me, I'm here for you, right? That sounds so kind, doesn't it? But their past experience, either with us or with others, is, well, if I tell you, you're going to come up and you're going to smack me for it, or you're going to tell me what I feel is silly or stupid or ridiculous, or I shouldn't feel that way. And so again, I can't teach you here in the remaining time in this podcast, but that's part of what the grief recovery method does, is it teaches us how to share our feelings without analyzing, judging, criticizing, or fixing. And when people start to see us being able to do that, it helps them open up a little bit. And then the piece about how can I do that without feeling bad about them? Everybody's a griever. That's just their brain telling their heart, I'm here to protect you. Don't talk about it. Don't tell them. What will they say? So when that happens to you, do the best you can to be in your present moment, share how you're feeling, and then invite theirs, but not with the pointy finger, right? But to be able to then just realize that's the way they've been taught, right? Their brain is working on overtime to not share those feelings. You mentioned you didn't cry. Oh my gosh. Seeing what you saw, experiencing what you did, and you weren't able to cry, that's just how strong the world had already taught you by the age of 13. Don't talk about it, keep it inside. What will people think? What will people say, right? It happens really early. So just, I guess, kind of give them a break, give them a little bit of grace, right? It's not you that they're rejecting or reacting to. It's their brain telling their heart, don't do it. It's going to hurt you. Somebody's going to hurt you. They're going to judge you. They're going to criticize you, right? So you go first. You learn first how to be in the present moment, how to share your feelings, right? How to be inviting of the other person. And then just remember, they've got decades of their brain thinking that it's protecting the heart. And it's hard. It's hard to crack that nut to get through to the heart. It's really hard.
Well,
don't
it's
give
interesting.
up. Don't give up.
Yeah, totally don't give up. And we have another question, but I wanted to add on to what you were saying, because I'm one of those fine people, or I'm a reformed fine people. And my biggest lesson, or my biggest nugget, was what is the least amount of action that I needed to take to create that balance between my thinking mind and my heart. So this person, whatever engagement I was in, did I really have time and, space to go through everything? Or could I just be congruent in myself and then maybe visit that at a later time? And that helped me build the capacity to be in that more when people are not in the same, dynamic as I am.
Right.
And that's honoring that.
And that's a habit we need to unlearn, is that going immediately to I'm fine, right? Yeah. And getting to that place of our truth. And you don't need to tell the details to tell your truth. Right. You don't even need to talk about the feelings. I'm having a tough day, but thanks for asking. Yes. There were times at the past where I would say, I'm teetering on that line between whelmed and overwhelmed, but thanks for asking. I don't even know where the line was, right? But it was my truth. It was my truth. Now, I didn't tell them any details. I didn't even tell them any feelings. I'm teetering on that line between whelmed and overwhelmed, but thanks for asking. And so even that, my heart goes, oh, she told the truth. And the brain goes, yeah, that was okay. Nobody's going to judge you for that, right? Yeah. In fact, sometimes they may giggle. Right. And when you say, but thanks for asking, that kind of puts a bow on it, and you don't have to tell more if you don't want to. They don't have to ask anymore if they don't want to. So just learn. And again, it's a habit. It is a habit to say, I'm fine. So next time somebody asks you that, just take a couple seconds and go, what is my truth? And how can I say that so that my heart will feel honored? Right. I've been better. I've been worse. I'm having a kind of a tough day. I'm not even sure how I'm feeling, but thanks for asking.
Yeah, so that kind of goes into our next question. Like, what about when an individual is ill and especially in a life-challenging illness. You know, I had my own battle with breast cancer, and I, you know, I didn't necessarily always want to be like, all right, here's A through Z about what I was going through. You know, again, it goes back to what you were saying, about what is the truth in the moment for me right then. And it's okay to say, I don't want to talk about it or what have you. But any thoughts on what to do when we're in like a challenging illness situation?
Right. Well, and timely too. I've got a couple friends who just got that cancer diagnosis in the past week, right? And so is the questioner asking, what do I say as the person with the diagnosis? Or are they asking, what can I or should I say as a friend or a supporter? Which side of the equation?
I think it's the first, but
Okay.
let's tap on both.
Yeah, very good. No, so I had a conversation really just yesterday with one of my friends who had just gotten the cancer diagnosis. And it was like, well, who do I tell? What do I tell? How much do I tell? Right. And again, that's up to you. Again, grievers, when we're in those situations, we're all grievers. We're grievers about change and challenges and all of those kinds of things. But we feel like we're victims. Right. And so the other piece for me is what this grief recovery method program does is it helps us get our power back. We're not victims. You get to choose who you tell, what you tell, when you tell. Right. You just said that when you started the conversation, I've gone through some of my own really scary health challenges. Maybe that's all this person needs to say when somebody says, how are you? Well, you know, I got a couple health things going on, but I'm making my way through the journey. You don't need to say if it's cancer or diabetes or a stroke, right? But then you went on to say, because you've got that first part out, I'm going through this scary health journey. Then you came back and shared a little more of your truth and said, yes, it was a breast cancer, right? And even there, you mentioned earlier having these tears just ready to well up. They didn't well, did they? Did you notice that when you said that? And I'll bet there were times in the past when it would have. Right. And so we all get to choose when we're going through those challenging situations, whether it's a physical challenge, a financial challenge, a relationship or a partner challenge, right? You know, I'm having kind of a tough time. There are some things going on, but thanks for asking. And then if and when and as you feel that they need more information for some reason, then you can share, well, it's a cancer thing. I've had kind of a cancer scare going on. They don't need to know what body part. They don't need to know what stage. They don't need, you know. And so you always have the ability to choose. You get to choose. And to me, that's really empowering that we get to choose who and when and what we say, right? It's on our terms. And then on the other part, if you're the person who's hearing that news, again, be respectful. Tell your truth. Don't start with, well, oh gosh, breast cancer. Boy, I'm so sorry. You know, you're lucky. You've got 2 breasts. You're still going to have the other one. Or, oh, it was kidney cancer. You're lucky. You've got another one, right? Tell your, you know, I've had some of those scares myself. It sucks, doesn't it? I've been through that time when you're waiting for test results. It's one of the worst times. It's scary, isn't it? And just acknowledging that, yeah, it is scary. It does suck. I've been there. And not to say, well, you know, we're gonna cure this and we're gonna, because it's scary at the time. And so don't deny those feelings of whatever they are at the time. Does that make sense?
Yes. And it goes, for me, it taps into part of the grief recovery method, intangible losses too.
Yes.
Because you know, the loss of hopes, dreams, expectations of how life will be from in the future type of thing. And that's a huge, I mean, I still to this day live with those from the death of my parents. So
absolutely,
they bubble up at different times.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yesterday was my anniversary. So I'm like, they didn't get to see that, you know, my dad didn't get to walk me down the aisle, you know, and I didn't realize that was even going to come up, but that is one of those intangible losses.
It's huge. It's huge. John James, the man who wrote the book, he and his wife had a daughter, and he had grown up in a home where his dad hit him a little. He says he never said he beat him, but he hit him a little. And when John and his wife were pregnant with their second child, they knew it was a boy. And so he began to build those hopes and dreams and expectations. He was going to be a better father to that little boy than his dad was to him. And we as women have those expectations too, right? Whether it's a boy or a girl, or they're going to walk down the aisle, or a little white house and a picket fence, but these hopes and dreams and expectations. And honestly, I think those are harder losses for us to articulate and to share with people, because we don't even take the time to sit and figure out, what is it that I've lost, right? Your dad died, and so this expectation of him walking you down the aisle. We don't think about the hopes and dreams and expectations, and yet still, even when we identify them for ourselves, how do I tell somebody else what those are like? Another big one is normal, right? When will things get back to normal? Whether it's an illness diagnosis, or it's a COVID pandemic, or it's 911. Remember when 911 happened? For those of you who are old enough to remember, we all just couldn't wait for things to get back to normal, right?
Yeah.
Right. Well, what is normal? A friend of mine used to say that's merely a setting on your dryer is normal.
Well, it goes back to the principles, right? Everything is moving to the next greater whole, and it's a new normal,
Exactly. Yeah. Normal is a figment of our imagination, right? And I remember somebody at the time of 911 saying, no, you don't want to go back to normal. We were asleep at the switch, right? How did we get caught off guard? How did, we weren't in the present moment, right? Anyway, so was there another question?
There is another question. So is there a power in transparency?
Yeah, cool question. Great question. Give that questioner a high five. Is there power in transparency? Yes, I think there is. Nobody's ever asked the question that way, but well put, well said. And I think the deal is, again, when we're trying to keep these things inside, right? We think we're in control, but we're not. That's society controlling us. That's the fear of what other people will think or say about us, or maybe even what we will think or say about ourselves, right? And so we think we're in control when we're keeping this stuff all inside, but we're not. And so yes, the power, freedom. I guess I would rather say, is there freedom in transparency, right? Absolutely, there's freedom. If I tell you all of my stuff, there's nothing you've got on me that you can bring up later and bring back, is there? Because I've already told that. I've freed myself of those expectations of what will people say or think or do if I share who I really am. And so whether it's, again, the power of words, right? Or the way we use words. I guess I would rather, and I don't know, I do like empowerment, so but whether there's power in transparency or there's freedom in transparency, both. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah,
I'm going to add just a little tidbit on that, and then we'll go on to another question. I truly believe that the power of transparency, in my experience, is internal power.
Absolutely.
Like I have autonomy and sentience to show up in the fullness of my being. And that adds to the empowerment, adds to the freedom. And
absolutely,
I tried to fake it until whatever that saying is, fake it till you make it type of thing. And I think I did a pretty good job for the majority of my life. And then there were those angels, I'll say, like you and a couple other people that are like, let's go deeper. I see that there's, an incongruence flowing through, if you will. And there's nothing better than being 100% in the sacredness of our beautiful uniqueness. So
absolutely. And when you are in yours and I am in mine, and each other, when we are all in that place, that's when we are all empowered as a community, isn't it? Yeah. When we're not afraid of each other anymore.
Right.
When
Yeah.
we're transparent, you get what you see. I am who I am. You are who you are. And when we are in that together, again, it blends those sacred moments. And I think it then gives us even more freedom to be that way with other people. Once we see that the brain isn't really helping us, right? Once we see that and we start to let the heart be in control or in charge of our transparency, our vulnerability, and we share with each other. So many times in those grief recovery classes, I have heard people say, I have shared things with this person that I have never said to anybody else. I have shared things here I never said to my therapist. I've never said to my pastor. I've never said to my priest. I've never said to my partner. And when we share those things, that freedom and liberation, trust between us just grows. Imagine what the world would be like if all of us lived in that space.
Well, that's a great segue into our next question. So how would you say the threading or the bridging of our conversation today touches upon the events in Israel?
Yeah. I work 40 hours a week for the Grief Recovery Institute. I lead grief programs. I meet with grievers. I talk a lot about grief. And yet and still, I need to keep reminding myself of those grief recovery principles and to use them myself, to be honest with how I feel, to give myself some space and peace. Right after the announcements started happening over the weekend, I literally felt sick to my stomach, right? That was that emotion down here that just needed to puke. And so how does all of this fit with what's happening now? First, identify, how are you feeling? How are you feeling as a result of what's happening in the Middle East? I don't know anybody there that I know of. I heard yesterday that there's a couple from our community who is trying to get out so that they can get back, but I don't know them well. But it doesn't matter if I know them, right? Because we're all a part of this human population. And there are people that I know who do know people who are there. And there are people in my community who are Jewish and Muslim. There are people in my community who probably side on both sides of the issue. And for me, I just need to go back to that grief recovery principle that says no analyzing, judging, criticizing, or fixing. We are all human at our core. We are more alike than we are different. And I have to keep reminding myself that even though both sides think they're right and the other side is wrong, at our core, we are more alike than we are different. And I need to try and hold my analysis, judgment, and criticism. I need to try and hold that and just realize there are people whose hearts are breaking on both sides of the issue, all sides of the issue. It's not even just two sides, all sides of the issue. There are hearts that are breaking. Yeah. Whether it's me, whether it's somebody next door, whether it's somebody in my community, or it's somebody around the world. We are more alike than we are different. And instead of my getting into that fight about, no, this side's right and this side's wrong, and no, we are all grievers. Cole James, the son of the author of the book, keeps reminding us in our work that we are the neutral party. Everybody's a griever, right? And that's what I want to help solve and ease, is that grief. To tell your truth. What's your truth about how you're feeling about what's happening there? Find somebody who's safe. Find somebody who will listen to you, to just listen. Start the conversation with, I want to tell you what's going on in my heart, in my space. Please don't analyze, judge, criticize, or fix. Just listen. In the program, when we talk about being a heart with ears, right? And so if what's happening in the world is impacting you in any way, find somebody that you can trust to be honest with and to be vulnerable with, and set those criteria. No analyzing, judging, criticizing. I just need to tell you how I feel. At the beginning of our staff meeting the other day, Cole started out the staff meeting with, there are things happening in the world. Let's just have a check-in. How are we doing? And you mentioned that even at the beginning of this live stream, this podcast, because we are impacted, we are affected by what's happening. And so first, to identify, how do I feel? And then if you can name it, I feel numb, I feel nauseous, I'm shocked, I'm saddened, I'm uninformed, right? There's so much. I'm so naive. I wish I knew more about the background of those populations. So identify what you're feeling, name it, and then give it voice with someone who will just be there to hold that truth sacredly in their hands as you share your truth.
Mm-hmm. So we have about 10 minutes, and I'd like to expand on this a little bit more, because I know for me, and we talk about this a lot in the groups and the trainings and what have you, it's how to shift those myths and misinformation. And how do we communicate with the younger generations? Because they might not have the cognitive ability to understand what's going on, but they're in households with people that
Exactly.
do. And
Exactly.
So how do we bring the kids into this?
Yeah, beautiful question. Great question. And you're absolutely right too, because how did you learn to grieve? From your parents? Well, they didn't do it very well, did they? How did they learn to grieve? Oh, from their parents. Oh, well, who taught them? Their parents. So how we respond or react to these changes and losses is generational, right? We've grown up in households. Maybe in your household, it was getting violent and yelling and hitting somebody or having a drink. In my household, we were taught to deal with it by eating something. You'll feel better. Don't talk with your mouth full. And so it's generational. And so the first piece of that question too is kind of look back and see, how did you learn how you're responding to grief? And then how can we change that to help our children? And so two things. I don't know if I'm allowed to promote. If so, you'll just have to clip this part out. But I would encourage everybody to go to griefrecoverymethod.com. The latest webinar, the latest blog that they posted to the website talks about things we can say to our children, how we can help our children in this world situation that's happening right now. And so the first, band-aid to the situation is go find that blog. What can we say to our children? And the first part is be honest and truthful about what you're feeling. And then just listen, right? And don't tell them, don't feel bad or don't be scared. It's a scary situation. The other thing is, so we have the Grief Recovery Method, which is the program you went through, Lori, but we actually have a second program that's called Helping Children with Loss. And it's not as emotional as the Grief Recovery Method, and it's more of an academic. Here we are again, right? It's more of an academic program for adults, teachers, coaches, counselors, parents, social workers, juvenile justice, whoever you are. If you love, care for, or work with children, this Helping Children with Loss program teaches us new ways to talk with children. And the first thing we have to do is figure out, how did we get to be the way we are? Where did we hear, don't feel bad? Where did we hear, well, grandma's in a better place? Or we lost grandpa. You mentioned earlier how we misuse language. What do you mean you lost grandpa? Is he hiding under the bed or in the closet? What does that mean? Being honest with your children. Grandpa died, or there are people who died in the conflict in Israel and Gaza. And so this Helping Children with Loss program is a great program for teachers, parents, counselors, youth pastors, anybody who loves, cares for, or works with kids. And there's a 4-session program that goes with it, but you can get the book and just read it. And it will give you some ideas too about how to help our children. Again, taking it back to public health, the Grief Recovery Method for me is like treatment. That's for grievers. That's to help people who are grieving. Helping children with loss, for me, is like prevention. We cannot prevent the losses they're going to experience. We can't prevent the changes or the things that are going to happen, but we can prevent some of the ways they've learned to deal with it. I really believe, from a public health perspective, we could reduce the drug use, we could reduce the violence, we could reduce the suicide if we taught our children healthier ways to deal with that roiling and boiling little tea kettle down here. Most of the stories you hear about mass shooting events, if you listen, it was a 19-year-old young man. 19, that's just an old kid, isn't it? Right? And their little tea kettle was so full of whatever they had seen and witnessed in their growing up story that was the way to deal with it. So again, the Grief Recovery Method for me is like, let me help a griever. This one, Helping Children with Loss, is let me help our children learn better, healthier ways to deal with those changes that have happened in their past, but also the ones that are going to happen in their future. We gotta work with our kids. We gotta do a better job.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also, I want to plug, because there's more with that offered through. So it's the pet loss too.
Yes.
And, there's so many ways that we experience grief. And I love this comment that someone shared about, like, I've never thought of the concepts that we're speaking about right now, and how to just say where you are at that moment, and
Exactly.
like be cool with that. And
telling the truth. Like, how weird is it to say telling the truth is kind of the root of this?
right.
To tell your truth.
Yeah. And be present. So, and that I think was one of another nugget that I took out of the program. It's like, how can I be up to date in my relationships? So if and when grief happens, I don't have those woulda, shoulda, couldas that I carry with me. I'm like, no, I tell you when I'm not liking the way we're interacting. I tell you when I love the way we're interacting, and all of that in between. And the grief recovery method is like, I think it's everybody should have a book.
I do too. And actually, again, not to plug too much, but if you go to that griefrecoverymethod.com website, we're actually giving away the book. All you got to do is pay for the shipping, right? And so we want, and gosh, again, God bless Cole, our boss. Yeah, our boss, I hate that word. Our colleague, our friend, our mentor. But we gotta get the word out there. Things are just happening so fast in the world, and the impacts, again, those public health, the illnesses, the addiction, all of that stuff. It's like we can't work fast enough now to get this message out there.
100%. And that's the beautiful thing about the website as a resource. There are so many things that are electronically available now. I just saw coming out the discussion about debunking, the stages of grief and what the grief recovery method creates, and what have you. So great resources. I'm always a resource. We have about 3 minutes. Lois is a resource. Any last minute tidbits that you would like to share?
I just want to mention too, that because I know your listeners are from all over the United States and the world.
Yes.
The directory. There's a wonderful directory. Lots of ways you can find people, but we have thousands of specialists all over the United States and Canada, Mexico, around the world. I've spoken with specialists in Ukraine and Russia and everywhere. But the directory, you can either go to our programs and look for whatever program you're interested in, and it will lead you to people there. Or in the About Us tab, if you go all the way to the bottom, there's a place where you can put in your city, your zip code, and you'll be able to find people in your area that you could do this work with. Or some of our folks now are advanced trained, and they can also do the program online. So if you don't find anybody in East Cupcake, Nebraska, find somebody to work with you online. So the directory, I would absolutely send people there too. You can find somebody like Lori, like me, well, maybe not exactly, but you'll find a grief recovery method specialist in lots of places all over the country. So go there, find somebody to be with. They will be that safe, non-judgmental person to hold your truth in their heart.
Yeah. So we have like 2 minutes, and in the sacredness of being, with our conversation today, I personally, this just came to me. I want to honor all peoples in Israel and across the globe, to just be in silence for the last couple minutes, if that's okay. So thank you, everyone, for joining us, and let your heart lead the way.
Amen. Yes, absolutely.
And thank you, Lois.